There we go. I was just I'll kick it off with the first one, then I'll go join him. But this could probably, Leora and I just talked about it, but one of the first questions, you gather user feedback and how you organize it. So, obviously there's lots from users, but then what do you do with it to make it actionable for yourself? Corey, you go first.
Yeah, so we currently, a lot of people have heard of Zendesk. So we currently use Zendesk, which has a lot of tools in it to help organize feedback. So for example, they have a bunch of macros in-house to be able to respond to users and try to tease out more insights. We also make sure that user logs are attached to all those feedback emails so we can dig on the technical side of things without interrupting users too much. And then what we also do is we actually send out daily, 2 times a day, actually, emails from our ops team that sends out emails on specific pieces of feedback that users have given us throughout the day. And with specific items, if it's something that triggers or kind of consider something that we want to dig into more, we're going to reach out back to the ops team. And sometimes we engage in full-on conversation with our users about what they can do, how can we help, what they're interested in. And so those are the tools that we use currently right now to kind of react to user feedback.
Chris, how about you?
We also use Zendesk, but we use something called Trustpilot, and it actually integrates directly into our Slack. So as people go in there and leave their reviews, it's immediately coming into a Slack channel. So we can keep pretty abreast of anything that's going on from that perspective. Being a bit more engineering based, we're also, we use a lot of bug tracking tools. So if something starts going wrong on the site, people might not necessarily know that it's not working the way it's supposed to, but we're getting pinged on the other side through a site like Airbrake to let us know that something's not giving the experience that it's supposed to be. And again, full story, just to be able to watch people go through and do stuff, that's huge for us.
All right, we got a question about roadmaps. Do you use a tool for roadmaps?
Leora, you go first.
Yeah, Leora.
I can take this one. I've used so many tools for roadmaps. I've also used Google Spreadsheets, which is great. I've used Google Docs. I've used Slides. I've used everything. But right now, we just are kind of onboarding our whole product team at BuzzFeed to use a tool called Coda. Don't know if you guys have heard of that, but we're using that to build a more unified roadmap across the entire product org, where every single project ladders up to different strategic areas and different goals. And it's really cool because it allows for different views, which I think is one of the most important things that a roadmap can do. RoadMonk out of Toronto actually also does that really well, because not everyone can view views and understands information in the same way. And I think that's one of the problems that teams face with roadmaps, is that some people like a Gantt chart, some people like a list, and having a tool that allows you to kind of look at it in different ways, the same information, has always been really useful for me. So yeah, Coda is one I use, but I also really liked RoadMonk when we used it at Checkout 51, actually.
Chris, how about you?
I was going to say the answer to this is, what haven't I used for roadmaps? It's you cycle through them all. Nothing has ever been really perfect. At the end of the day, I think we still use Google Sheets. It just, things change so quickly. I don't know if it's the type of business we are, or where in the scope of company growth we are. We barely can plan 6 weeks in advance without the whole roadmap just flipping on its head, and COVID hits, and all of a sudden everything on the roadmap is gone, and it's a whole new thing. And sometimes some of these tools get a little bit too much in the way. But I like Airtable. I like Google Sheets. I think they're flexible.
All right, we've got a question. You want?
I was just going to ask Corey, who uses?
No, I think to just jump off Leora and Chris's points, we've used a million tools, whether it's a deck, whether it's a Google Sheet, whether it's actually we've tried OKRs, and to try to drive that objective-based roadmap. and kind of failed, to be honest with you, at it. We didn't stick with it long enough, in my opinion. But it's one of those things where it's really, I think it's grounded in the objective of the quarter, of the year. It's grounded in what you want to achieve, and how you get there. It can be a winding path or it can be a straight line. You don't know when you start out. So I think the key there is, to kind of Leora's point, is making sure the message is clear and the overall objective for the different audience is important. There is what you're trying to achieve versus trying to like pre-fit these exact engineering requirements. And we're going to take up this much time to do X, Y, Z, and achieve this specific objective. I think if you try to go down that path, you're setting yourself up for unrealistic expectations. So I think just making sure that where you're trying to direct to and go to, it is clear across and aligned across the organization. I think that's the best way, and any tool that can do that, I think is fine enough for that.
Okay, there's a bunch of questions sort of around the same theme, so I'll try to sum them up. But I think part of this whole process, like I talked about when someone's like, so how did that feature go? A big part of the start of that whole process is getting buy-in. So you have company OKRs. Do you help set them? How do those get set? And then from the goals, how do you decide what to build to satisfy that goal? And then how do you get buy-in from the stakeholders? I feel like this is 3 different other events, but if anybody has any like quick tips for like getting buy-in from the stakeholders, especially like CEO or senior leadership team, and then sort of like matching things up to your goals and your OKRs, and then looking back and going like, did that achieve that goal? Or do you build things without thinking specifically about company goals? That sounds like a trap question. I feel like you're doing it wrong, but that's not how I'm. So who wants to talk? Leora wants to talk.
A little bit. So one that I try to do is make it so that I don't really ever have to get buy-in from my stakeholders, because I've like so closely worked with them and like brought them along on their journey, or even gotten their ideas and those become our ideas for like the tech team. So I kind of feel like if you're, I don't know if this is wrong to say, but if you're in a situation where you're like, oh, we have this idea and we're like really going to have to fight to get it approved by leadership or by stakeholders, then like you might have gone off track somewhere. Like they should have kind of been along on that journey a little bit with you, with your like shared goals and strategies. So that's my take on that question.
Yeah, I think that's a super key thing, because I think early on in my product management career, I mean, I did everything wrong. But it's definitely like you realize with more experience that it's not like you have an idea. It's just that like you're taking information from everywhere else and just making it happen as a product manager.
Yeah,
it's sort of like my current take on it, because I know that
it's never my idea. Like it's someone else's always.
But I think that's the art of it, right? Is to make it other people's ideas. And I think part of that is, we talk up a good delivery game of iterative delivery and learning as we go. And I think that applies the same thing to a roadmap or objective, right? You want to socially kind of suss out those objectives and those ideas early with different stakeholders, people from engineering, people from sales, people from marketing. So that when you get into that room, it's not like you've put the world on your back and said, I hope this roadmap works. Everybody's already nodding and going, okay, this makes sense. This is all things that we've talked about, and it's objectives that we're all in line with. So I think to Leora's point, it's that socialization in advance is massive, and it helps make that process much more seamless.
Yeah, I do think someone also asked, like, what's the most important skill as a product manager? And that's a weird one, but if like what you just touched on, socialization, like being able to, you have to be very social. You have to make sure that everybody is on board before you walk into the meeting, basically. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a question about, how do you move forward with the business with regards to like COVID and the economic environment. But I think, maybe we don't have to talk about it for your business, but like as product people, like you said, we have to be social, and we have to be socializing ideas. And I found that to be one of the most difficult parts of working remotely. Everyone being remote is not having that. So interested in, what you guys have been doing to make that part of your job still feasible in these current times. Chris, how about you first?
Zoom whiteboards have been a lot of fun. It allows us to sort of like collaborate in real time and almost feel like we're next to each other, even when we're not, and still being able to have that visualness and that sort of like tactile, I'm drawing this out and this is our plan and we're working on it together. I think that's something that's been really working well for our team as far as like keeping our ideas together.
Are you using tools for that whiteboarding? Like, what are you using?
It's just in Zoom. You just share a whiteboard and then it's right there.
We're a meat company, so we don't have that. And I'm just like, anytime someone's like remote whiteboarding, I'm like, oh, tell me more.
Yeah, we do a lot of
there's a
remote
really
pairing, too.
sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say there's a really cool tool that we've used called MIRO, MIRO, for like brainstorming from afar, and it's fun. So that's a good one if you don't have Zoom.
Yeah, I think a lot of it touches on, stakeholder empathy. Like you lose those walk by chats where you can sort of kind of, hey, what's on your mind? You can pick their brains. You just don't have those offhand conversations as much. So it becomes much harder. So I just think being proactive being a product manager, you just have to understand, hey, it doesn't hurt to just send a quick, hey, check up on X stakeholder or X person to find out, what are their pain points right now? Is there something they're expecting to be delivered that you're currently not focused on? There's just a lack of those little small conversations that really help formulate a plan going forward and kind of drive that usual stakeholder empathy you get in the office. So I think just reaching out, a lot of people are doing social events through whether it's Meet, Slack, however, Zoom. And I think those are good ways. But at the end of the day, I think grounding it back into business objectives and making sure that people feel comfortable in their jobs because their job is being taken care of. Because a lot of people look at us product managers to make sure that our job gets done so that they can do their job. And so being proactive there, I think really helps.
Did it?
Oh.
She just took a screenshot. Full disclosure.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, there was a question there that I saw, a few questions actually that were like, how do you tie your product work into your OKRs and your goals? I don't think we have to talk about that because we talked about it a bit, but I think it's important that your product objectives come from those, not the other way around. It's not. I just wanted to say that. So now we have a question. Does it make sense to think of the tech infrastructure of the product, or you could just say the product, from the very first day if the product scales? So should you worry about scale at the very first, or do you check product market fit and then think of the infrastructure for scaling later? There were other questions about like tech, how do you manage tech debt? And have you ever had to have like a sprint of fixing something? I know the answer based on the smiles, but just maybe a little bit about how you deal with tech debt and how you do, if you're building an MVP, do you have to worry about scale? And this is kind of different if you're just launching like your first startup or if you're working at a gigantic media company. So how do you deal with scale, and how do you the other one, tech debt? How do you do tech debt?
Corey, you go first.
Oh, lovely. So we've been around for 10 years, so we have a lot of tech debt. And we did a redesign, which in itself was just erasing tech debt, which was nice. But I think for scale, especially when it comes to an MVP, you have to make sure that if it takes off, it doesn't crash, right? Like if something hits a mark, you want to make sure that you can at least account for that. And in terms of just prioritizing tech debt, I view our engineering partners just as stakeholders as well, right? They care about what they do, they care about what they produce. Making sure you always carve out and understand why the tech debt's being done. It's not because the code needs to look prettier, but if it actually has a tangible impact on the overall product, on the performance of the product, I think you have to listen. And even though there might not be direct user value in that tech debt, there's down the stream user value. So I think the key is just listening to your engineering resources, making sure you carve out enough time in your sort of sprints or whatever, Kanban board, whatever you use, making sure you carve out that time to address that is key, because it also shows them that you care about what their job is. You care about them being performant in their job. So I think that's really where it comes from. And we just make sure to listen, and just like I would listen to a user, I'd listen to an engineer to tell me that, hey, I need to do this because this will help us down the road. Awesome. Let's figure out a way to get it done in our time constraints.
Yeah, I don't know if anyone maybe Chris, like, do you have anything to add to that, being, the CTO and sort of the person who's driving the product roadmap?
Yeah, from the scale question, unless, like, sort of like Matt was saying, unless you're at Google scale from the get-go, I generally will go for do things that don't scale. Paul Graham has a great article on his site about doing things that don't scale, and I've definitely, like, we've hacked some stuff together with tape just to see if it works. And then when it does work, and we were using something not very good in the background, and all of a sudden all that falls apart, but you at least got the learning that people are using it, it works, it's worth the time to build it. So that's kind of part of that, rather than investing that time in advance and then it just not working out and just being a waste. From the tech debt side, that's one of those things that's just always going to be there, but we've baked into our culture this sort of like idea of code and being like a gardener, this like weird abstractness, but always leaving it a little bit better than it was when you got there, tending to it, so that we don't ever really come across these like, oh, we got to just raise it to the ground and start over, right? We're just slowly making these small improvements, and then eventually those bubble up into larger over time. So that's kind of where we're at.
Yeah, so sorry to add, but like, it's one question that we often ask our engineers, right? Is when they're coming up with a solution, is this the best way possible so that we don't incur tech debt sooner than we need to? And so making sure that sort of framework is applied to when you actually build the solution engineering, and that you're thinking about, hey, in 2 years, are we going to need to rewrite this whole thing? Making those decisions up front just does a whole lot of so much for you to make sure that 3 years down the road, you're not all of a sudden rooting up the garden again and trying to rebuild it from scratch.
Yeah, and one thing that we do, like, that I try to do, is make sure that the engineers understand where we want it to go. So it's like, here's our MVP and here's what we're looking to do right now, but here's sort of where we want to take this, and so that they can make those decisions with that in mind. And it's not always going to mean that you don't have to do extra work down the road, but at least they're part of that conversation and involved in that decision making. I have a question for you guys that, I love this question because I ran into it a lot when I was trying to get into product management, but just how technical do you think you need to be a good product manager?
Let's go round table. Chris, how technical do you need to be?
Well, I mean, my degree is in philosophy, so on that side, there was like no technicalness. So I'm sure I'm an outlier, but you don't need to be technical to get into it, but you do need to be analytical, and you do need to have big picture thinking. Like Belinda was saying, like, you need to be able to understand where something's going to go and what that means to whittle it down to what you can do now. So I don't think that necessarily means you need to know how to go in and build it, or that you need to know how to be able to like piece it together, but there's like a certain mindset that you need to be able to have to be successful.
Okay, Leora, how technical?
Technical, I don't think. I have to say that because I'm not. I kind of fell into product management when I had my first product management job. I didn't even know what a product manager was. My background was in advertising beforehand. I cannot write code. I think that there's all sorts of different product managers, and I think that being a product manager is a job where you need so many skills because you're doing so much of everything. There's not such thing as a perfect product manager who has all of it. You might have someone who's really, really great at the technical stuff, but perhaps not as good as at the communication or the organization. So I think what's really important is, if you know that you're not as technical, or that you're not as good at analyzing data, or whatever it is, that you make sure you're upfront about that from the outset, and surround yourself with team members who can kind of like fill in those gaps and you're filling in theirs, right? So that's the approach that I've taken. And I definitely don't think you need to have a technical background to be a PM.
Okay, Corey's been really still for me this whole time. So either he's frozen, or he's really still. You there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, technically.
So a little bit about, I have a master's in computer science. And what I use it most for is actually sort of engineering empathy. Like I haven't coded in probably 10 years. So in my perception is, again, I think I'd echo Leora and Chris. Like it's a nice to have maybe, and maybe it targets where you actually expertise in product management. Maybe you can become more of a technical PM, but I've seen just as successful PMs in various other backgrounds. And for me, it's not required. It's a nice to have. And what I often preach is the whole team model, right? Where you got to be good or at least adequate in a lot of different areas to be a successful product manager. But really pick that area that you specialize in and the area that you're going to own and you're going to be a guru in. And if you're not backgrounded in technical expertise, maybe that's a little bit harder to become that technical expert. And that's okay. Like you're going to be completely successful as well. So I think as long as you understand and can empathize with an engineer, right? I think that's what it goes back to is can you understand where they're coming from? They're a maker. They like to sit down and generalizing, but they like to sit down and they have a craft. And as long as you can understand that and listen to them, I think your technical expertise isn't required to kind of get to that level of empathy.
I think that ends the Q&A because Wayne Jones asked a question that has no answer, and it is, what's a product manager? I think every single product manager you ask will have a different answer to that, which is the most interesting thing about this job, I think. So there's lots of great questions. I wish we could stay here all night and answer. So we are going to wrap this event up. Thank you very much, Leora, Chris, and Corey. Excellent stuff. I learned a lot. I think everybody else probably did as well. And I have a few closing statements, and then the networking will be open for another hour and a half for you to meet people.
Talk about some of these questions that we didn't have a chance to get to, unfortunately. So, yeah.
And you can reach out to us if there's anything you want to know from us or any of the other panelists. They're all available. I think their information is available in the chat or somewhere, and reach out on LinkedIn, send them a message. They're all happy to answer. So yeah, thanks very much for investing your time and talent in helping the tech community win together. If you enjoyed the event, we'd love if you share it on LinkedIn and Twitter with the hashtag TechTO, and join us again at the next free online TechTO together on June 8th. If you're looking for more knowledge sharing, the TechTO Insider Program will give you access to daily interactive sessions with tech leaders from 12 to 1 p.m. So you can have lunch and you can listen to a prominent VC and a prominent founder from Toronto talk about how they hooked up and invested in each other, and a bunch of other great, interesting stuff like that. I'm always surprised at the content that they deliver while I'm just eating lunch. You can join today for $20 a month. And if you're interested, if you love what TechTO is doing, we'd love to get you involved. Apply today to speak at an event, to volunteer, sponsor an event, anything. Reach out to TechTO. You can Google them and find their contact information. And if you have any feedback, send it to info@techtoronto.org. And if you want, like I said, the networking session open till 10 p.m. I'll be there. The leaders you heard from today will be there, and we look forward to seeing you soon. Let's win together. Thanks,
everyone.